I want everyone to know what a true honor this day is for me. A little over 20 years ago, while working in a small resident agency for the FBI in Rockford, Illinois, one of my colleagues introduced me to a brand new talk radio show, a radio show called The Rush Limbaugh Show. The group of us started listening, particularly while we were out on surveillance. So whether I was out on a drug interdiction, disrupting a bank robbery, or surveillance of suspected terrorists, I had a companion with me almost daily if it was safe to do so. When we would be done with our day's work, the group would get together and we would discuss the issues. And I think one of the reasons that the Rush Limbaugh Show has been so successful over the years is that I noticed that regardless of the political persuasion of the other agents in the office, regardless of their position on different issues that Rush may discuss there today, our debate became much more reasoned and much more articulate. I don't think that there's a higher honor that we can give to Mr. Limbaugh than the fact that he generated this kind of thought within this small group of agents of the FBI. As a matter of fact, today, 20 years later, two out of the 6 of us are now conservative state representatives. Myself, and Special Agent James Station, is about to start his 4th term in the, unfortunately for him, the Illinois House of Representatives. For some reason, I can't get him to comprehend that severity of the majority. But anyway, it has resulted in 2 out of 6 of us becoming conservative representatives. And so it is really an honor for me to be here with you today, to welcome all of you, and to welcome our special guest, Mr. Rush Limbaugh. And so at this time, I would like to invite Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder to say a few words. Governor Kinder.
Thank you, Gary, Speaker Tilley, and my lifelong friend Rush Limbaugh, fellow state officials and guests, honored guests. What an honor to do me with this invitation. There are 3, now going on 4 generations of family ties between mine and the Limbaugh family. And we meet here in the historic House chamber where your grandfather served. In this building and in this chamber. He served a Republican in 1930, 1 term, 31 and 32. He also was a prosecutor of an impeachment in that 1 term of office of the state treasurer. Mr. Rush Sr., his son, from whom you took so much, your father, Mr. Rush Jr. to me. Your mother, Millie, and your extended family here today, but those first 3 or 4 are not with us today. They're watching from their heavenly perch, and how very, very proud of you they are, I know. Rush started in radio 45 years ago at KGMO in Cape Girardeau. To distinguish him from his 2 ancestors of the same name, both alive at the time, he was Rusty when he was growing up, and he took the name Rusty Sharp on KGMO in 1916 in Cape Girardeau. A number of years later, and I believe about 7 times being fired later, 7 experimental launches of the format where guys said, we pay you to spin records, not to commentate. But in 1984, he started his conservative talk format in Sacramento. And due to the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, stations could now broadcast for the first time editorial commentary without presenting opposing views. This was brilliantly communicated in a Wall Street Journal column by Daniel Henninger, who wrote that Ronald Reagan tore down this wall, the Fairness Doctrine, in 1987. And Rush Limbaugh was the first man to proclaim himself liberated from the East Germany of liberal media dominations. In the latter stage of AM radio's long decline, it looked to be a terminal decline at the time. Rush's show first aired nationally August 1st, 1988, with 56 stations carrying the show. That number would later swell to eventually more than 650 stations, and then 400 or so more stations on the Armed Forces Radio Network. Rush's success demonstrated a nationwide market not previously catered to. And those of you under the age of 40, you can't imagine how bad it was growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s with the national media, where you had three channels all spouting the same line, and the print media dominated by the left, by a few elite newspapers and magazines, and no conservative voice contending for national hearing in the marketplace of ideas. So his astonishing success paved the way for other conservative talk radio programming to become commonplace. And figuring out the size of the audience is difficult, but will stay with the figure of over 20 million listeners every week that he earns day in and day out in the competitive marketplace. This success, of course, paved the way for the others to follow: Sean Hannity, Laura Ingram, Mark Levin, and so many others. The November 2008 poll by Zaki International, no conservative, no Republican he, found that Rush Limbaugh was the most trusted news personality in the nation, garnering 12.5% of poll responses. In 1992, former President Ronald Reagan, with whom I will rank our guest of honor today, in the pantheon of American heroes of the conservative movement, wrote Limbaugh a letter in which he thanked him for all you're doing to promote Republican and conservative principles, and acknowledging Reagan continued, "You have become the #1 voice for conservatism in our country." In 1992, Rush published his first book, The Way Things Ought to Be, followed by another one the next year. Both became #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The first remained there for an astonishing 24 weeks. Limbaugh was the 1992, 95, 2000, and 2005 recipient of the Marconi Radio Award for Syndicated Radio Personality Radio of the Year by the National Association of Broadcasters, and is one of only 2 4-time winners of a Marconi Award. He was, of course, inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame in 1993. In 2002, Talkers Magazine ranked him as the greatest radio talk show host of all time. On March 29, 2007, Limbaugh was awarded the inaugural William F. Buckley Jr. Award for Media Excellence by the Media Research Center, the Conservative Media Analysis Group. And in January 2008, Conservative Magazine Hidden Events nominated Limbaugh as their 2007 Man of the Year. And I just want to say that great pantheon of conservative leadership and heroes, Buckley, Reagan, Limbaugh, you rank right up there with them, Rush. And President Reagan stressed to us all that freedom is not transmitted in the bloodstream. Each generation must win that freedom again. And if ages hence, let's say 3 or 4 generations from now, Americans still breathe the breath, the air of freedom in a free and self-governing republic, they will owe that precious gift, and we will all owe that precious gift in no small part to the man we honor here today, Rush Hudson Limbaugh III. Speaker Tilley's about to get the hook on me. I have one other function, and that is to introduce the man who made all this possible, your leader, Speaker Stephen Tilley.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks to my House colleagues and my Senate colleagues who could be here. You know, when the news broke, all of you had an opportunity to answer questions from the President. Did you agree with me, or did you not? And all of you supported me, and for that I'm certainly grateful. I want to take the time to thank the Limbaugh family for being here. If you all could stand up, I'd like to, for my house, to you all welcome. I'd also like to take the opportunity to welcome a few people who without I would not be here. My father, Everett, my stepmom Bonnie, my brother Jason, and my uncle Wendell. Could you please stand and let the house recognize you? We're here to honor a man who's been the voice of conservative America for more than a decade now, who rose from humble origins in southeast Missouri to become the most listened to talk host on radio, and who, in case many of you didn't realize, has from time to time been involved in a controversy or two. As we all know, the news broke about my plans to induct Rush Limbaugh into the Hall of Fame of Missourians right as he was embroiled in a national controversy. It was a controversy that led many people to ask me, why would I be crazy enough to think the most successful person in talk radio history deserved a spot in the hall? Well, the truth is, the idea came from the same place that many of my good ideas come from, my father. We were at lunch several months ago, and we were talking about what an immense privilege the speaker has to enshrine deserving Missourians into the hall, and I told him about my plans to induct Buck O'Neill and Dred Scott, and our conversations turned to other worthy Missourians. Without hesitation, my dad suggested Rush Limbaugh. When he said the name to me, I knew that it was not only a good idea, but also something that I would really believe was the right thing to do. And it didn't change when liberal groups tried to suggest that I should back away from my decision because of controversial statements or stances that Rush has taken. These groups tried to threaten and bully me to reverse my course. But if you know me, you know I can't be bullied into shying away from something that I know is right from my heart. And you also know that I'm no stranger to controversy myself. As a speaker who once said it wouldn't be a bad idea to flood a town in southern Illinois, I know what it's like to say something that I regret. But I also like to think that when I've said something I shouldn't, my words don't invalidate everything else that I've done. I feel the same way about Rush. He may say things that strike a nerve. He's right most of the time. He even may say things that I disagree with from time to time. But that doesn't do everything he's accomplished in his career. And it doesn't provide a reasonable excuse why he shouldn't be honored by his home state for his many accomplishments. We're here today to honor him because he is a Missourian who's accomplished more in his life than most of us would even dare dream possible in our own. He's had the type of success and made the kinds of contributions to the field of talk radio that have put him in both the Radio Hall of Fame and the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame. And even though many on the left don't want to admit it, he's devoted a large portion of his life to philanthropic efforts that have made a real difference in the lives of countless Americans. This year marks the 22nd year in a row that Rush has led a radiothon to help Leukemia and Lymphoma Society fight against blood cancer. Just last year alone, Rush raised $3 million in the search for a cure. And Rush works together with the Marine Corps and law enforcement foundations to provide the children of fallen soldiers and the police officers with the assistance that their fathers no longer can. This is Rush Limbaugh. But these aren't the kind of things that the radical liberal groups want to make known when they talk about Rush. Instead, these liberals who try to put forward the illusion that they believe in a philosophy of tolerance or understanding, they're anything but tolerant, and they're anything but understanding. But fortunately, there are only a handful of them here in Missouri. I think I read where the latest anti-Rush rally in Columbia actually broke single digits. Which Rush is actually an improvement because they had an anti-Rush rally in the Capitol where there were more media than protesters. Seriously though, this is a proud moment for me today to be able to honor someone from my part of the state who is the very definition of a famous Missourian. But on an honest note, I'm also glad that we're finally able to answer the question so many reporters were asking me last week, where is the Rush bus? I'm happy to tell you, it's right here, it's right where it belongs, it's in our state capitol and in the Hall of Fame of Missourians. And it's my immense honor and privilege to be the speaker who was able to put it there.